I'm Vinnie Politan. The subject of my investigation is the tragic mass murder of 4 innocent University of Idaho students. Their alleged killer seems poised to admit to his crimes and take a deal to escape the firing squad. Here's the story. A nightmare that haunted Moscow, Idaho for 2.5 years came crashing to an unexpected end. The accused killer, the criminology PhD student, once poised to face the brutal facts of his alleged crime in an August trial, suddenly struck a plea deal with prosecutors. On June 30th, he agreed to plead guilty to the stabbing deaths of Kaylee Gonzalez, Madison Mogan, Xana Kernodle, and Ethan Chapin. In doing so, he avoided Idaho's death penalty, potentially execution by firing squad, and now faces 4 consecutive life sentences plus 10 years for burglary. The plea offer stunned the families. Still, prosecutors argued the deal guarantees a lifetime behind bars with no appeals, a resolution quicker and more certain than a trial rife with potential delays. A change of plea hearing is scheduled for July the 2nd, with sentencing expected later in the month. The courtroom saga may be close to over, but for grieving families, closure is impossible. Closure is impossible. I mean, this is an unexpected turn of events in this case. I didn't expect it. And it seems the families didn't expect it either. Now, each family has their own way to react to all of this. But Kaylee Gonzalez's family and her father, Stephen, have been very outspoken, and her sister as well, Aubrey, have been very outspoken from the beginning of all of this, and have been there and have been strong for Kaylee, and have, you know what, pushed prosecutors in this case. They have posted their reaction to some of the developments in what has transpired in the past few days. I want you to take a look and a listen to these posts from social media. One of our producers, Janet McGowan, is going to read them for you. But take a listen. I think it gives you an idea of what's going on with this family.
It's true. We are beyond furious at the state of Idaho. They have failed us. Please give us some time. This was very unexpected. We appreciate all your love and support. Hello, my name is Aubrey Gonzalez, and I'm the youngest member of the Gonzalez family. What the families of Ethan, Kaylee, Maddie, and Xana have endured over the past 2.5 years is beyond comprehension. We've had faith in the system, but at this point, it's impossible not to acknowledge the truth. The system has failed these 4 innocent victims and their families. The introduction of this plea deal just weeks before the scheduled trial is both shocking and cruel. Bryan Kohberger, facing life in prison, means he would still get to speak, form relationships, and engage with the world. Meanwhile, our loved ones have been silenced forever. That reality stings more deeply when it feels like the system is protecting his future more than honoring the victim's past. The justice system was created to serve and protect, not to re-traumatize grieving families. And yet, time and time again, we find ourselves blindsided, unheard, and unsupported. This last-minute plea deal feels less like an act of justice and more like an afterthought. We did talk to the prosecutor on Friday about the possibility of a plea deal, and it was a hard no from our family. Sunday night, we received an email that sent us scrambling. We met with the prosecution again today to reiterate our views on pushing for the death penalty. Unfortunately, all of our efforts did not matter. We did our best. We fought harder than anyone could ever imagine. The death penalty is merely an illusion in the criminal justice system. When available, it serves as a bargaining tool for the state. And when rarely applied, it's never enforced due to a highly inefficient appellate process. The notion that someone can plead guilty to a crime and still face years of appellate delays reveals a systemic failure. Latah County should be ashamed of its prosecutor's office. 4 wonderful young people lost their lives, yet the victims' families were treated as opponents from the outset. We weren't even called about the plea. We received an email with a letter attached. That's how Latah County's prosecutor's office treats murder victims' families. Adding insult to injury, they're rushing the plea, giving families just 1 day to coordinate and appear at the courthouse for a plea on July 2nd. After more than 2 years, this is how it concludes, with a secretive deal and a hurried effort to close the case without any input from the victims' families on the plea's details. Our family is frustrated right now, and that will subside, and we will come together as always and deal with the reality that we face moving forward. Once again, we thank everyone for their thoughts and prayers.
It's heartbreaking. It's absolutely heartbreaking and frustrating for families that have to go through the loss, they go through the shock, and then they go through our system of justice. And again, each family dealing with it their own way. Each family has their own perspective on all of this. But that brings us to the first question in our investigation. How will this plea deal impact the families? Because it is a deal. Oh, he's getting something. Absolutely. Life is different than life on death row. Here to help answer that question, clinical and forensic psychologist Dr. John Paul Garrison and Dr. Janie Lacey, psychotherapist and CEO of Life Counseling Solutions. Great to have you both here. Dr. Janie Lacey, your initial thoughts here as to the Gonzalez family, as we hear some of their thoughts in all of this. How do you think this plea deal is going to impact them in the short term and the long term?
Well, Vinny, it's tough, right? When we consider just this is going to be a very emotional landscape for these victims' families. You know, when we think about a plea deal, there's lots of things that happen in these types of scenarios. Like on one hand, there's relief at avoiding the prolonged trauma of a lengthy trial for some families in that process, but it can re-traumatize families also repetitively seeing evidence presented and reliving in the court. But we'll see a lot of families struggle with it because the feelings that justice may not be fully served without a trial that can result in the maximal penalty, in this case, the death penalty. But, you know, what we also would see is what a lot of people would call this justice ambivalence, or the families desperately want, you know, closure, but they also want answers, Vinny. So a plea deal might provide legal closure, but it's going to leave these families with a lot of emotional and I would say psychological questions that are going to be unanswered. So for the families of all 4 of the victims, they've been through an extraordinary amount of trauma, and their healing process can be deeply intertwined with their sense of justice being served. So when we just think about the elements to even begin their healing process, a lot of it has to do with safety, truth, and meaning making. And a plea deal may address some of those, but him being incarcerated, but it's going to complicate them seeking the truth. And when cases go to trial, families can get the more complete picture of what happened to their loved ones. When a plea deal, some of these details may never fully be explored in a public forum, Vinny. Yeah.
Dr. G, I want you to take a look at this. This is from CBS News, who spoke with Kaylee's best friend's parents, Maddie's family, Maddie Mogan. Mogan's father, Ben Mogan, told CBS News he was relieved to receive the letter regarding the plea deal that would keep the alleged killer in prison for the rest of his life without the possibility of parole. But for Mogan, the plea deal is justice. We can actually put this behind us and not have these future dates and future things that we don't want to have to be at, that we shouldn't have to be at, and that we have to do with this terrible person. We get to just think about the rest of our lives and have to try to figure out how to do it without Maddie and the rest of the kids. What are your thoughts, Dr. G, about how this plea deal is going to impact these families short-term and long-term?
Well, not surprisingly, we see a divergence in terms of how people handle this. Some people are going to feel out of control. Some families are going to feel like we've been robbed of the opportunity of him facing justice. And that loss of control is going to be a little bit re-traumatizing. On the other hand, there are families that are going to see this as some degree of at least beginning to heal, some degree of closure. And for them, they're going to be able to avoid being re-traumatized by the trial. So there's no good solution, but I think that having this plea deal is probably the most humane solution for the families that don't want to have to go back through it again.
Dr. Janie Lacey, this is from TMZ. This is from Xana Kernodle's family. Kim Kernodle, Xana's aunt, who was so furious she was in tears, told EMZ prosecutors floated the idea of a plea deal a few days ago, and the family made it clear, no way. When we spoke with Kim, she was on a conference call with prosecutors. She says prosecutors told her the defense approached prosecutors with a plea deal, and the prosecution went along to spare the families the pain of a trial. Kim says that's ridiculous because at least two of the families, hers and the Gonzalez families, wanted the suspect to face a jury. Kim says prosecutors were especially concerned that the families would have to see the gruesome crime scene photos of their loved ones, but she says, we know the graphic stuff. They were not trying to spare us. What I do know, Dr. Janie Lacey, in a lot of these trials, when those photos go up, a little heads up is given to the family and they can leave the room. Sometimes they do. Sometimes they look down. Sometimes they want to see it. Dr. Janie Lacey, what about the two families who are completely set against this? How do they get past this moment? How do they get past the actual plea and then the sentencing day?
You know, we said it, Vinnie, in these cases, it's so important for us to understand, even with all four families, that each family member, they're going to respond differently to this plea deal. And like we just heard, some are going to feel relieved while avoiding the public spectacle and the media attention of this high-profile trial, where others are going to feel robbed. They're going to feel robbed of their day in court. But, you know, I think the key here is that each family have a meaningful voice in the process. And this is what also gets lost, because the families are the ones that have the voice for the ones that are voiceless in this moment, and that their victim impact, I believe, should be honored regardless of the legal resolution. And I think that's where this gets lost in all of this, because the victims, their families are the ones that represent them and give them a voice.
Absolutely. Dr. G, what are your thoughts about how this next hearing will be when you're in court and something is happening? Again, for the two families who don't want this to happen, you are there and you are watching this now take place. How difficult will it be for them to be there and remain under control?
That's a great question, and I think it's going to be very difficult, because I do imagine that there's going to be a lot of anger. There's going to be, and it's not like it's one person. There's whole families that are grieving, that are re-experiencing a lot of the feelings that probably came from the initial shock of finding out what happened. So there's going to be feelings that might surprise everybody that come out. That, yeah, I do think it's very possible that some very intense moments could happen. Somebody could speak up or yell or something like that. I wouldn't be surprised if something like that happens, because I don't think any of us can accurately empathize with what it's like to go through something like this. And when, once again, you feel that loss of control, if you feel like you've been betrayed by the court system, I would imagine that they probably feel like they don't have to play by the rules. They may get quite angry themselves.
Yeah, and they do absolutely believe that sense of betrayal from the beginning. They even indicated there's some things that have happened that they haven't spoken about that will shock us when we learn about it, but we'll wait for that. In the meantime, Dr. G is going to stick around, I know, a little bit later in the show. Dr. Janie Lacey, always great to have you on. Thank you so much. Coming up next, can the families stop this plea?
We want a community that protects the most vulnerable.
We want to understand the mindset behind your actions in this case.
I'm going to give you a news scoop.
What happened?
I did it.
Really funny, really. I laughed. When you see me, I laugh.
I don't want any of this.
You think you should get some kind of credit for not killing people?
Not at all, no.
You are a shrewd operator.
Interview with a Killer. Marathon starting Friday, 11/10 Central. Only on Court TV.
Yeah.
The death penalty, you support it, right?
We definitely do. Yep, that's part of the reason we moved to Idaho. You know, we want a community that protects the most vulnerable, and that's something that if a father can't protect them, then you hope that the society is willing to step up and do the right thing. So that's what we're looking for. The ultimate form of justice is that.
What Steve Gonzalez is looking for is the ultimate justice for an accused mass murderer who took the life of his daughter in a brutal, brutal way. And you wonder, Idaho has the death penalty. It's there, I presume, for the worst of the worst, or is it just there to be a negotiating tool for prosecutors? Wow. So he's disappointed. We know how he feels. Take a look at this from his Facebook page, though. This is the latest post before we went to air. We stand strong that it is not over until a plea is accepted. We will not stop fighting for the life that was stolen unjustly. If you feel called or moved to try to make a difference, please contact the Ada County Courthouse to express your thoughts or feelings. It is not over until it's over. We still have time to fight for a chance to heal. If you feel called or led, please contact those responsible for the decisions being made. Our understanding is that the voicemail box is now full in all of this. And that brings us to the next question in our investigation. Can the family stop this plea? Do they have rights? Do they have the power? Do they have the influence to do it? Joining me to help answer this question tonight in our investigation, trial lawyer, former prosecutor Dave Leroy. Also with us, criminal defense attorney, former prosecutor Jack Rice, also a former CIA officer as well. All right, agent. Okay, Dave, let me start with you. You're out there, Idaho. You know the stuff inside out. You were the chief law enforcement officer of the state. Can the judge consider the families in accepting or rejecting this plea? Will the families have a voice at the plea hearing?
The families cannot stop the plea process. But in Idaho, we have very, very strong victims' rights provisions, both in our Constitution and our statutes. And so the victims will have, through their families, a very meaningful voice in these proceedings, even though they can't stop the process from going forward. That decision is controlled by the prosecutor. The families, under our Idaho law, both Constitution and statute, have to be given notice of any substantial proceeding, have to have the right to appear, and most particularly, have the right to articulate at hearings like sentencing hearings. So I would expect all four of these families, whether they approve of the process or disapprove of the process, to give very meaningful voice to their opinions, strongly held opinions, and describe their interests in terms of their loved one's outcome here. They can't stop the process.
Just for clarification before we get to Jack, Dave, so what you're saying is that would happen at the sentencing hearing, not at the change of plea hearing?
Arguably and specifically, they can have the right to articulate at a change of plea hearing as well.
Oh, okay.
I would expect Judge Hippler to allow that if they wish to express those opinions tomorrow or whenever that hearing is held.
Fantastic. Jack Rice, your thoughts on what is happening here? And obviously, the families aren't all on the same page. We know that Maddie's family is relieved, but we know that Kaylee's family and Xana's family not on board with this. I think Ethan's family may be okay with it. I haven't heard from them. But what are your thoughts tonight about what is happening in our system of justice with this plea agreement?
Vinnie, it doesn't matter which side of the fence you're on this one, nobody wins. None of these families will ever be whole as a result of this, whether or not this were a death penalty case, whether or not they took this case to trial, whether or not he was sentenced to death or not. When we look at this, the real question now is sort of where we go next. I think a big part of this has to do with that victims advocacy and the voices of the victims. Even if the court, even if the judge allows and accepts this plea, what's critically important now are that the voices of these victims, of these families, be heard. I have to tell you, this is one of those brutal kinds of cases that every parent who has ever sent their kids to college with the idea that some stranger would break into their house and steal them, that is the nightmare of all nightmares. So my heart goes out to all of them, whichever side they're on, because this has been a brutal journey and will continue to be so.
Let me ask you, Dave, what is the purpose of the death penalty in Idaho? Is it for punishment, or is it merely a bargaining chip for prosecutors so they don't have to try the case?
Absolutely. It's for punishment in the ultimate cases, and certainly this is an ultimate case. On the other hand, this outcome can be explicable, is reasonable, is defensible also from a community point of view. It is not true that this young man will grow to be an old man with access to community activities and everything else that one could speculate. Indeed, he will be, I think, in solitary confinement for the rest of his life with no possibility of parole. It's important to emphasize here that there is no plea bargaining going on in terms of reducing the charges. There's no pleading to 2 of the crimes and dismissing the other 2. This is everything but the death penalty in this resolution, and it is defensible and explicable from that point of view, avoiding 2 weeks of jury selection, 3 months of a trial, perhaps 15 years of appeals. There are no winners, as counsel has said, in a murder case, but this is explicable.
Let me ask you, Jack, if a prosecutor doesn't seek the death penalty and offers this deal to this defendant, I mean, what defendant goes to trial facing the death penalty? Chad Daybell? Is that it? Is that the only one? Like, who, if not a mass murderer of 4 innocent people?
Yeah, that is always the difficult piece of this when we think about this individual versus the totality of those being charged. But at the same time, one of the benefits that you get out of this is certainty, because what would absolutely happen without question,
I get the certainty. I get the certainty. We're out of time, but I will just say 2 words about certainty of life without the possibility of parole. Menendez brothers, coming soon to a freedom state near you. Thank you both so much. Great to see you, Dave and Jack. We'll have you again soon. Up next, will the accused killer reveal why he did it? I'm Vinnie Politan. We continue our investigation of the horrific, senseless mass murder of 4 young adults from the University of Idaho. Their alleged killer was facing a trial and a potential death sentence, but now it looks like the prosecution gave him a deal. Here's the story. The Idaho murder case of 4 University of Idaho students was poised for a high-stakes August trial until a plea deal crashed in like a thunderbolt. On June 30th, the accused agreed to plead guilty to all charges, receiving 4 life without parole sentences and an extra 10 years for burglary in exchange for avoiding the firing squad. But families were blindsided. The Gonsalves clan called it shocking and cruel and accused prosecutors of rushing a secretive deal weeks before the trial without meaningful input. Steve Gonsalves railed that while the accused killer avoids execution, their daughter's voice was silenced forever, calling the system a failure. Prosecutors defended their moves, citing overwhelming evidence and warning of potential appeals and trial trauma, arguing the deal guarantees swift justice. Yet the emotional rift remains, some families embracing closure, others feeling robbed of accountability and pushed towards silence. It's tough, right? This deal, the reaction of the families to this deal, the reaction of the public to these deals as well. But there's something else happening here, and it's about the defendant. And what will this plea hearing be like? What will he say? What will he do? Well, we've seen him in court before with his attorney. Let's go back to May 22nd of 2023 at his arraignment.
Okay, Ms. Taylor, is Mr. Kohberger prepared to plead to these charges?
Your Honor, we will be standing silent.
Okay, because Mr. Kohberger is standing silent, I'm going to enter not guilty pleas on each charge. Counts 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5.
That was at his arraignment, but now it's a change of plea. So I can't imagine that he will again be allowed to remain silent or stand silent. In many courtrooms in front of many judges, when you plead guilty, you have to allocute. You have to reveal what you did. And that brings us to the next question in our investigation. Will the accused killer reveal why he did it? If he sets forth the factual basis and admits his guilt, will he ever, either in court or out of court, talk about why he did it? Here to help answer that question, clinical and forensic psychologist Dr. Gary Brucato. He's also the author of The New Evil. Also with us, clinical and forensic psychologist Dr. John Paul Garrison, Dr. G. All right, Dr. Gary Brucato, we've seen killers, mass killers, serial killers plead guilty before. I just want to remind everyone about what happened when the BTK killer, or Dennis Rader, BTK, was in court for his guilty plea. What happened? Let's take a look.
I told her that I used the ruse of being wanted. I was on the run. I needed food, car, warmth, warm up, and I asked her. I handcuffed her and kind of talked to her. Told her that I would like to get some food, get her keys to her car, and kind of rest assured, talk with her a little bit and calmed her down a little bit, and then eventually I checked. I think she was still handcuffed. I went back and checked out where the car was, stimulated getting some food, odds and ends in the house that I was leaving. Then went back and removed her handcuffs and then tied her up, and then eventually strangled her.
What did you strangle her with?
Pantyhose.
All right, what happened then?
I kind of like Mrs. Hedge. I already figured out I had a plan on leaving, and put her in a blanket and drug her to the car, put her in the trunk of the car.
So you were able to strangle her to death with these pantyhose?
Yes, sir.
That was a shocking moment none of us are going to forget. And I just wanted to remind the folks at home what can happen at one of these plea hearings. What are your thoughts, Dr. Gary Brucato, about the accused Idaho 4 killer? Do you think he will ever reveal why he did it, either in court or in any other scenario?
Well, what's a little complicated about the question is that we're not fully sure of the motive. We have something of a catch-22 there. If the motivation is similar to what it is that I've been speculating about for some years now, we would expect that this individual has motivations that look a lot more like those of a serial killer than somebody committing an isolated mass murder. With an individual of that type, giving them any forum in which they are, number one, expected to tell the truth, number two, given a chance to kind of relish in details, recall details publicly, receive attention, is always problematic. And in this particular individual, there is such a scientific, detached, mechanical quality that the relaying of details, if they are true, would be probably very painful for the people listening, because as human beings, we have a tendency to anticipate that there will be emotion, some degree of remorse, some tearfulness, some regret. What I think you'd see here is a mechanical, callous, detached presentation of facts, as if you're talking about amoeba in a petri dish. And I think that would be extremely painful. I also believe that underneath everything that would be seen in that sort of tone is this colossal ego that ultimately would enjoy this. It's part of what is so frustrating about the way this story turned out, is that you're going to wind up with an individual that now is sitting in an isolated place and able to join the pandemonium of criminals that will receive fan mail, love letters, book requests, etc.
Yeah, I agree. Dr. G, what are your expectations about what we will hear from this accused Idaho 4 killer in court and perhaps afterwards down the road?
As far as in court, I think he will be very literal with whatever the judge asks for. I don't think that he's going to provide a lot of superfluous details. I think similar to BTK, he really enjoys his intellect, so he might provide extreme detail if that's what's asked for. But I don't think that we'll ever have the full truth outside of court, outside of these days. I think that he's going to want power, so he's going to hold on to a lot of the true motivations. You look at guys like Ted Bundy, John Wayne Gacy, they always told lies. They would have confessions, they would have interviews, and so much of what they said wasn't true. So there's lots of motivations they've talked about that were complete nonsense, and I could see something similar happening here. So ever having a truly meaningful or satisfying answer, I think, is unlikely.
Dr. Bucato, he got caught. Do you think that this was the first time? Do you think there is any sense that he may have attempted something previously? Is that something that you think he would ever reveal, or his future intentions if he had not gotten caught?
The behavior and the motivation that were glimpsed are so much like those of a sexually motivated serial killer that I am fairly certain that there was some degree of sexualized fantasy that was at the root of whatever happened here. But what it seems to me was intended to occur got messed up because of bad intel, planning, people being there that weren't supposed to be there, and you wind up with a mass murder and no satisfaction of the fantasy that probably had been intended. If that is true, that is somebody that you would anticipate would keep going on to other offenses, because the point is to play out a fantasy over and over again and make it more and more perfect. A big clue of that, for example, is the particular type of pornography that we learned from the Dateline episode was present on his cell phone that he had been viewing. The cosplaying Bundy and studying other offenders certainly could be something you'd see in someone who's studying criminology, but we don't dress up as them, cosplay as them like we're at Comic-Con. That was a little strange. And there are many other things that point in that direction. I don't believe that he previously did, that we have no indication of that whatsoever, but the personality type that appears to be present and the behaviors and motivations that seem to be present are those typical of somebody who, if not caught, would continue playing out that fantasy over and over again. And in fact, we even saw a potential signature element, which is something totally unnecessary for the commission of the offense, done only for psychosexual fantasy, which was taking the time to carve up the hamstrings of the male victim before leaving when he should have been getting out of Dodge. For those of us who are in the world of studying serial killers, we know that that was absolutely unnecessary beyond some kind of weird experimentation or hostility that a male messed up this sexualized fantasy, got in the way of the fantasy. So when we see those kind of signature elements and all of that, we start thinking this is a fantasy-driven thing, and you don't stop that.
Dr. G, why do you think he decided, and it seems like he decided to take a deal once offered? Is it, do you think, fear of the firing squad? Do you think it's to be able to control the outcome to a certain extent? What do you think it is?
I think that's exactly it. It gives him some degree. It's actually the only degree of control he really has at this point, because they probably had him dead to rights, I'm guessing. And so at this point, I'm sure that there was the satisfaction of, okay, well, at least I get to decide my own fate, and at least I get to survive. A lot of people that would have committed something like this wouldn't be able to live with themselves. They probably wouldn't even care if they survived. But for somebody like this, survival is really his only drive at this point. So the idea of firing squad versus staying in prison forever, the idea of the death penalty is just beyond unacceptable to somebody like that.
Big thank you to Dr. John Paul Garrison, Dr. G. Incredible work on YouTube. You can check it out, folks. I always do. Thanks so much. Dr. Gary Bucato is going to stay with us. Still to come, what will life be like for the accused killer in prison?
Do you understand the charge in count 2, murder in the first degree?
Yes.
Do you understand the maximum penalty?
Yes.
We want to understand the mindset behind your actions in this case.
I'm going to give you a new scoop.
What happened?
I did it.
Very funny, really. I laugh. When you see me, I laugh.
I don't want any of this.
You think you should get some kind of credit for not killing people?
Not at all, no.
You are a shrewd operator.
Interview with a Killer. Marathon starting Friday, 11:10 Central, only on Court TV.
The maximum penalty for this offense, if you were to plead guilty or be found guilty, is death or imprisonment for life. Do you understand?
Yes. 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 No. Yes.
Mr. Kohberger, do you understand the charge in count 1, burglary?
Yes.
Do you understand the maximum penalty?
Yes.
Do you understand the charge in count 2, murder in the first degree?
Yes.
Do you understand the maximum penalty?
Yes.
Do you understand the charge in count 3, murder in the first degree?
Yes.
Do you understand the maximum penalty?
Yes.
Do you understand the charge in count 4, murder in the first degree?
Yes.
Do you understand the maximum penalty?
Yes.
Do you understand the charge in count 5, murder in the first degree? Do you understand the maximum penalty?
Yes.
Well, the accused Idaho 4 killer will not be getting the maximum penalty. The maximum penalty is the death penalty. And it looks like everything is moving towards all indications that prosecutors have offered life without the possibility of parole, 4 consecutive life sentences, and he has accepted. So that means it looks like life in prison without the possibility of parole, unless the law changes somewhere, and it does sometimes, like it did in California. And that brings us to the next question in our investigation. What will life be like for the accused killer in prison? What's the day-to-day going to be like psychologically? Where is he going to be? Helping us to answer this question, clinical and forensic psychologist Dr. Gary Brucato, and also joining us, Sam Mangle, federal white-collar advisor and sentencing mitigation expert. Sam, let me start with you. What do you think life is going to be like behind bars for this notorious killer, mass murderer?
So I can sum it up in 2 words: pure hell. I often, probably 98% of my clients are white-collar offenders. And the first question they ask is, am I going to be safe? Am I going to be okay? Can my family come and visit? And my answer is, don't worry. It's not like what you see on TV. It's not like Oz, Shawshank Redemption, even Orange is the New Black for female offenders. Well, for this young man, it is going to be exactly like that. And for those who say that he's getting off easy by not facing the jury and possibly getting the death penalty, it would not surprise me that at some point, probably sooner than later, he wishes that his life would be over because of the situation he's in. And if he goes to a facility like Idaho maximum security, he will not be a high-profile individual like you might see on television now in the federal system with a Mangione or a Combs. There are going to be inmates there who have daughters or sons that were the age of these children that were murdered. And in comes a relatively thin young white man, well-educated, and he's going to stand out like a sore thumb. And every day of his life, he's going to be extorted. He's going to possibly be in danger. And the alternative is to go into some sort of protective custody or solitary confinement, which even then is a terrible existence. And I'm sure, as any clinical psychologist will tell you, not being in general population and being in a secluded environment like that can easily drive someone to the point of suicide or it's a very dangerous situation.
Dr. Gary Brucato, what are your thoughts about what life will be like for him in prison and what his mindset will be? Will he enjoy anything? What do you think will happen here?
Well, first of all, one of the things that puzzled me about the deal that was made is that Kohberger is somebody who, as I understand it, a board-certified neuropsychologist, was diagnosed with autism, which would have, under Atkins, made a pretty good argument for the death penalty being taken off the table in the state of Idaho anyway. So that it was odd to me, certainly not a guarantee, but it's interesting to me that an attempt wasn't made to try to get away with the offense, and then if it didn't work out, to try to say, I can't be executed for that reason. I think the autism diagnosis will also serve him well as somebody who does mitigation cases in my own forensic practice. I think it may also do him some service in the sense that an argument could be made that to have him in the general population in a overstimulating environment, an unpredictable environment, so forth, could be bad for his mental health. Whether you believe the diagnosis or not is another question. I have not examined him. But if he does indeed have that diagnosis and the argument is made that that mitigation is necessary, he may theoretically wind up in a more isolated situation. I think that if he is isolated, it'll be a much more pleasurable existence than people realize, beyond the awful things that Sam's mentioning, because what you have is an individual who, I've always said, kept 2 victims alive and killed 4, partly because he saw himself as a kind of arbiter of who lives and dies, kind of like a godlike figure. And in the end, he let himself live. The way he arbitrated is that he gets off the hook and gets to, from death. And I think that what'll happen now is having the opportunity to be a kind of center of attention figure, even though it may be painful, there'll be that sort of extra element. And I'm picturing a kind of Dennis Rader-like situation, a little more isolated, letters, autographs, admitting it, finally, because you have somebody who's living a double life, as he was, there's a strange relief in the mask coming off and being able to say, you know what? This is the Grim Reaper figure that I actually am, and I'm proud of it. Let me just tell you how I did it. Let me help the scientists and talk about, myself. And I think you're going to have a lot of that. And I think that's what's so sickening about the way this sort of seems to have turned out.
Sam, we have about a minute left here. On a more practical level, my understanding is that he was, or maybe still is, a vegan. How about that, the vegan diet and the practicalities of what that'll be like for the rest of his life? Do they have nice offerings?
So both the federal and state prison systems are tremendously underfunded. Will they have tofu for him to eat? Sure, he might get tofu. Will they have rice? He might get rice. And on commissary, he might be able to buy, certain things if they're not taken from him from other inmates. But he certainly will not have a salad bar with fresh vegetables or pizza being brought into him. It is a miserable existence, even if he is put into a more psych-oriented ward in that facility. And I've had clients that are in psych wards in both state and federal facilities. And when they're not around other inmates, the lack of social stimulation is a horrible thing for them to go through. And chances are he won't have access to family for quite some time. He's not going to have, in my opinion, fans that are reaching out to him.
We're out of time, but Sam, everything you're saying, a lot of the viewers are happy to hear tonight. And we appreciate your insight. Dr. Gary Brucato, thank you as well. Sam Mangle, appreciate it. Whether you are for or against the death penalty is really irrelevant to this case. The people of Idaho chose to put the ultimate punishment on the books for the worst of the worst, like, a mass murderer. But now prosecutors have used it as a bargaining chip in this case, rather than as actual punishment for 4 horrific murders. I wonder if that is why the people of Idaho chose to have the death penalty in their state, or if it is just makes it easier for everyone to just, wrap up the case. I'm Vinnie Politan. We'll dig for the answers as the investigation continues.